It, but they need to get their process down a little bit.
Well, they've been there long enough. It's time to fucking get your process down.
Let's call them northbound coffee. Because you have I asked for a double shot, and she handed this to me. I'm like, how big are your shots? She's like, well, our one shots are 2, so that's 4. So you have 4 shots of espresso there.
Coffee shop math.
Maybe as much as is in one of those cans of fucking nuclear waste that you drink. Whatever you call that
I
stuff.
haven't had one of those either. I'm not that consistent with any of the things that I do. Very inconsistent. It's very haphazard.
But you know what? When you keep it, mix it up.
Yeah,
people like that.
Yeah, I like to mix it up.
Unpredictability.
Here's something unpredictable. No pun intended. My wife last night was trying to dictate to Siri something on her watch. And I waited till she finished. I didn't know who she was talking to or what she was sending, but in the little pregnant pause before you hit send after a dictation, I thought it'd be funny to yell penis.
Of course.
So that whatever it said, it would then say penis. And then she said, you asshole, that was a work email. And I thought, that's called penis bombing.
Penis bombing.
I just invented it. So talk about stream of consciousness.
Wow.
I'm swimming upstream here.
You could start a movement.
Yeah.
A movement of penis bombing across the land.
I thought this was so funny and brilliant. I actually wrote it on the outline.
You like penis jokes.
Penis jokes, it works with my kids. I mean, it works with everybody.
Does it work with your wife? Does she? I bet she knows a couple good penis jokes.
And we're back. Welcome to Recovery in the Middle Ages, the podcast about 2 middle-aged suburban dads in their pursuit of life, love, and recovery. I'm Natx.
And I'm Mike.
And boy, do we have a show for you. Today on RMA, Natx returns from his family trip to the belly of the booze beast, an all-inclusive Mexican resort. And we celebrate our 1-year anniversary together with you on a very special edition of RMA.
Wow, this is 1 year? We've been doing this for 1 fucking year?
In fact, to the day.
Really?
According to,
we started on like a Tuesday or something.
But on Podbean, it says our first episode, which is nice to meet you.
All right.
August 20th, 2020.
Do we get some kind of flair from Podbean for this? Besides, I did notice they sent the bill right away for us to re-up.
And,
so buy some T-shirts. We'll get into that.
Yeah. So,
visit us.
Wait.
Yeah, that's next. Visit us at middleagesrecovery.com.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where you can listen to the show, buy merch, and tell us your story. We got the new T-shirts in. I don't know if we have a way for you folks to buy them yet. So
we have a way. I just have to implement.
Yeah, we need to get on that because I have a box of T-shirts and I have a scale. And
it's a triple beam balance.
Well, it's actually funny because I had the scale out yesterday because the one person that ordered one of our first generation T-shirts, I sent it out yesterday, and I left the scale out. My wife came down. She's like, where's the scale from?
What do you weigh?
Looking cross-eyed at Dimitri. Like,
why is it set to grams?
You took off your shoes and socks. You're sitting in here barefoot. You fucking hippie.
I have itching feet.
Oh, I didn't need to know that.
I'm sorry. They itch.
I thought you were doing that in celebration of the fact that Dead & Company is at Citi Field tonight.
No, why aren't we going? We could interview some of the sober guys there. Man on the street.
Here's why. Because last time I went to Dead & Company at Citi Field and tried to get in, it took like an hour and a half to get through security. Now they're checking everyone's vaccination status. So I think we would have to get there at like 2 in the afternoon in order to get in by 7 o'clock tonight.
How do you smuggle in acid? I guess it's kind of small. You can put it
in your wallet. It's a little piece of paper.
You always heard that urban legend. Well, I did. And you tell me if you heard this too when you were in high school doing acid. They would always say, I knew this guy. He had a sheet of acid in his front pocket on his shirt, and it was raining, and he was running away from the cops, man. And like it rained, and then like the acid, man, he did like 24 hits, and he didn't even know it. He's still tripping to this day. Yeah,
well, I bet he knew it after a couple hours.
And that guy was the original member of Pink Floyd. You always heard
Syd
that,
Barrett,
right?
yeah.
Did that really happen? I remember hearing that and thinking that sounded like an urban legend.
Sid was one of the. I don't know if that really happened, but to digress, Syd Barrett took a lot of acid, and he was the original guitar player for Pink Floyd, and he put out a couple of really good little acoustic albums afterwards called The Madcap Laughs and Barrett. But he kind of lost his cookies, and he was one of those unfortunate souls who had probably had a pre-existing genetic predisposition to schizophrenia, and the acid just kind of brought it out. Because
that'll do it.
He showed up during the Wish You Were Here recording sessions, and Gilmore didn't recognize him. He came in and he was fat, and he said something about lamb chops, and then he wandered off. But
interesting.
He died a few years ago. Interesting character. Anyway, visit us at middleagesrecovery.com and tell us your story. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Get the latest news, updates, and meet other RMA Monsters on our private, unsearchable Facebook group found easily on our public-facing Facebook page.
Can I just say something?
Public-facing Facebook page.
Let me I had to change something, and I thought this was funny. I couldn't leave it. But originally, I had written, get the latest updates and meet our blah, blah, from our private, unsearchable Facebook group found easily by searching Recovery in the Middle Ages on Facebook. And I'm like, I can't write that. So I changed it to what it is now. And I think because it was...
Since nobody listens to this part anyway, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's like the ads. People forward through the ads.
I wish we had some ads.
We'll get some ads soon. Great reviews will be read on the air. Please log on to your favorite podcast app. Apple Podcasts is best. Something about the English in that. Give us 5 stars and say something nice to massage Mike's delicate ego. That would be me. Just do that. We've sort of hit a plateau with star reviews, I noticed.
Yeah. Guys.
Even as listeners increase.
Listen, we have 360-something people on our private group, which is so awesome, and 62 reviews on Apple Podcasts or whatever.
But we have thousands of listeners.
We do, and please
God knows how that happens.
I don't know. Please give us a review. It really helps. It means that we pop up more. The algorithm looks at those types of things, and yes, please do it. And we like to read them. It gives us something funny to read.
And if you head on over, if you mosey over, as they say in the West, over to our webpage, middleagesrecovery.com, there's a little form you can fill out.
Yeah.
That's your story.
Your story.
You tell that story to us.
You can tell a long story or a shit story.
Yeah.
Tell a shit story.
A medium-sized story is probably best for our content management.
I like listening to shit stories when I nosh on my yogurt pretzels.
Okay. It's good. We're going to do voices today?
I don't know.
Is this the time we should mention the story thing, or did you want to do that when we read the other story?
Well... the other story.
Okay.
So we did have a short, your story. We actually got one.
All right, well,
do you want to read that? Well, what should they do finally? The best way to share the show.
Oh, yeah. The best way to share the show, what is it, do you think? It's to share it with a friend.
Share it with a friend, please.
If you get something out of it, share the love and help grow the RMA movement. Do you have trouble with your RMA movements in Mexico?
I didn't get sick.
My son has some RMA movement issues when he comes back from Mexico. Before we move on, we have a new Tell Us Your Story.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
It's a novella, really.
It's on the website. You fill it out and we read it.
Do you want to read this one?
Yeah, so we got a form. The person's name is Novella. Novella says, hey, defrost frozen foods in minutes, safely and naturally with our Thaw King. 50% off for the next 24 hours only, and worldwide shipping for a limited time. All the best, Novella. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Novella.
Novella, for sharing your experience, strength, and tips on how to defrost frozen food with us.
We appreciate that, but we'd really like your recovery stories or crazy addiction, something besides Thaw King. And so thank you, Novella, for that.
Speaking of addiction stories, you may remember... Do you remember a few weeks ago? I kind of do a little bit. We did a 2-part series on Joseph Naus's books.
Yes.
Straight Pepper Diet and The Falls Graph Revelation.
Yes. I love those books. I've listened to them twice each.
So before we dropped the episode, I reached out to Mr. Naus to see if he would be willing to come on and do an interview with us. And I didn't receive any response. Because you and I had hatched this idea that maybe we should do is review people's books and then tell them we did the reviews, and then they'll agree to come on. Right? Because it's like then they've already heard us talk, hopefully positively, about their work.
Let's hope.
So I finally get a response from Joseph Naus.
And
he says he thought I was spam originally, which is why he didn't respond to me. So I guess I have to switch up my email but in technique. But in a weird bit of synchronicity, he was responding to a Facebook message I sent him 3 weeks ago, the day after I sent him a follow-up email.
Huh.
So
that's persistent. Being persistent, consistent,
but it kind of blew his mind, and I said, "Well, I would love it if you'd come on and do an interview." And he went back to our podcast and listened to both episodes that we did on his, and he said, "Guys, I had plans this morning when they didn't include listening to 180 minutes of recovery in the Middle Ages," which he apparently did, and it was very nice of him. He said some very complimentary things. He said that we nailed the book, we got it right.
Yeah, he was impressed with the exposition,
and. As half apology for blowing off my original email and half, I guess, reward for giving him a good review, he gave us a bunch of free download codes for the audiobooks of Straight Pepper Diet and the False Graph Revelation. And I would encourage any of you guys to go check out those books because they're really good, especially if you're, they're applicable to everybody, but if you've sort of lived the middle-class life of a lawyer or a business person that's, had your addiction torpedo you in the middle of your career.
Upper middle-class, college-bound guy with everything going for him. What does he do?
And it's witty, it's funny. So anyway, what I'd like to do is share that wealth, since Nat and I have both already purchased Joseph Naus's books. We want to distribute these codes to you guys. So the first 5 people that send us your story will be rewarded with free download codes for either the False Graph Revelation or Straight Pepper Diet, depending on which one you want. If you haven't done the first one, you should probably do that one first. But
fill it out on the form online or
middleagesrecovery.com. So this is our first contest coming on our year anniversary.
And can I tell you, it's so validating, because we do this show and, we pretty much assume that nobody is going to listen, which the evidence is kind of going against that these days. But the fact that we, spent a lot of time looking at these books, talking about them, reading them, really internalizing them, and then to hear from the author and get a positive feedback, it's just really cool, I have to say.
As people pleasers, it really warmed our hearts.
I love to please people.
Yeah, me too.
I wanted to say, before I get into the Mexico trip, because today we're going to do a little different format of the show. It's going to be a couple of big topics and a little bit of life update, because my life has been almost a show in itself this past week.
I think you got that backwards.
Which one?
You said it's going to be a couple of big topics and then a little bit on the life update.
Oh, life update first.
Yeah.
But firstly, I really wanted to make a bigger deal out of this anniversary show. My plan, the best laid plans, and so on and so forth. But I would have loved to get some of our guests to get, Aaron Moore and maybe get Dave from Dopey and Jed from Church and Other Drugs and all the people that, have come on the show and, been cool to us and all of that. But it didn't come together. But I did write a little thing, to just kind of... what I'd like to say is I'd like to thank the listeners at home and abroad. Aaron Moore, Dave from Dopey, Jed from Church and Other Drugs, Jeff D, Grant B, G Money Smooth, Sergeant Slaughter, Uptell the Webmaster, and all the monksters that have contributed to the show. Anybody who sent us a story, a review, and our little community, and especially our wives for putting up with this passion project over the past year.
Yes,
also,
indeed.
I want to thank Mike for agreeing to do something so sensitive with a practical stranger, which we really were.
You're so sweet.
We really didn't know each other even close to on this level. And it was kind of a crazy idea. When we started talking recovery, we were both kind of like, we're having these conversations about it. And it's, this is really interesting. I could talk to this guy, for a while. And
50 hours.
Yeah. So it took a lot of faith and courage to do the podcast, and I'm grateful for that. We're just getting started. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's only going to get better. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Nat. That really touches me deep inside. You know what they say? Yeah. There are no strangers, only friends who have not yet met.
That's true.
We were friends long before we ever met, I think.
So when a stranger touches you deep inside.
You should tell an. You should tell an adult.
Tell an adult. Yes. Who do we wait? Before you move on, did I forget anybody to thank? I don't want to.
Probably we'll hear from them if we did.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Anyone who has contributed.
We could thank our original best fan from Tacoma, the other Jeff.
Yes, Jeff from Tacoma. We love you.
Then moved to Alabama.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't know if he still listens, but
yeah. Join the movement. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I can't believe it's been a year. I can't believe when you go back and if you listen to some of the earlier episodes and then you come to the more recent ones, I think we've improved a little bit.
We have. And I think the vision of the show, I mean, things in life rarely turn out as you plan them. And this is sort of one of them. My idea for this show initially, and I have pages of handwritten notes that I put together once the idea came into my head. And my idea for the show was to document two practical strangers who only know each other peripherally. Right. Who then, kind of learn about each other's story, and we do it on the air. And then that would be the compelling story. And that was my idea for it, but it really turned into these are the conversations I've had with people in rehab outside of the group. This is something Dave from Dopey always says. He wants it to be like the meeting after the meeting. Right. These are the conversations that I would have with other recovering people, outside of the formal groups. And that was where I got some of the best insights and I think we're heading in that direction, but I really loved, the book reviews. I love really getting into the details and the facts and the research and just discussing the shit out of it.
Yeah, and what it does is it gives you and me a couple hours of recovery time a week. Yeah. That's not in the strictures of a formal 12-step meeting or any other kind of meeting, but it keeps our recovery present, foremost in our minds. I mean, I had when I thought about doing this show, and I had an idea for it, for a recovery-based show several months before you and I met and started this thing. But my idea was to sort of be more removed and just talk about topics of interest in recovery.
Like the BBC reporter or something?
Something like that. Yeah. But and I'm glad I didn't end up doing that, and I'm glad it ended up being this rather than that because, it's more personal this way. Yeah. It means more.
And recovery is personal.
And there's a million fucking other podcasts like that out there.
And there's only one RMA.
So, we could just be sitting in the front of your store talking, but here we're talking into microphones trying to monetize the fucking thing.
That's right.
So let's... Anyway.
So, yeah. Well, there it is. Happy anniversary. Here's to another year of whatever it is that we do. Right. What did you do this week?
So while you were not drinking in Mexico, I went out, did some fishing with Ben out in the Sound. We caught some porgies, which are fish that you catch around here.
That's Long Island Sound for those who don't know.
Yes.
It's the Sound meaning a body of water.
You want to tell them what bay I came out of too?
What bay?
I'm being sarcastic.
I know. I don't want to say it. Clamor Bay.
No, it was cool. We went out. We caught some fish. The one I would not have been able to do that had I still been drinking because I don't even think I would have gotten a boat because if I had a couple drinks the night before, I tend to get seasick if I go out on boats. My wife, on the other hand, gets seasick whenever she goes out on a boat. So I think this is probably our last season with the boat, first and last, or second and last. It's just I don't know. It's too much trouble. It's too much money. You know what they say about boats? It's like the two happiest day of a boat owner's life are the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And in between, it's just pouring money into a hole in the water.
I did own a boat with a friend of mine. That's another story, though. So I was a lot of work.
I don't know. You know what it is like when you have two teenagers who don't want to spend much time with you anyway, then all you have is the little one who's happy to go out with you, but it's not a family activity. So I think the boat's going.
But you caught porgies.
I learned how to fillet them without cutting my finger
Seriously?
off. Yeah, YouTube, man.
I never had a porgy in my life until my son went to fishing camp and brought one home.
They're good though, right?
I loved it. Yeah. Maybe it was just the way, because my wife's a great chef. And but he compared to the flounder, or what was it? Maybe the fluke that he got. I like the porgy's flavor. Yeah. It's a nice fish. And
you have to catch like 10 of them to get a decent amount of meat because they're bony. But But also, like, I had another thing happen to me this week. I had an old friend of mine contacted me. He's in his 50s, early 50s, looking for advice on how to get sober. He found he found out that I was in that particular club by the Recovery Elevator Facebook group, which I now know is not at all private.
Yeah, well, that's how we met.
And that's how we met, and apparently it's how everybody else who gives me a thumbs up on my posting of how many days I have on the Recovery Elevator Facebook page now knows that I'm in recovery, which, whatever. It used to be something I was mildly concerned that people would be aware of, and now I could give a rat's ass. But what's interesting, it's like he's not the first person either. I've had other people that I know from the past that were that are good friends of mine that we used to go carousing together have reached out. It seems like when you hit your early 50s, that's when the systems start breaking down, and you start needing to address some of the behavior that you've been doing for all those years and the patterns, and you want to break out of those patterns. And, which is why I'm glad our podcast is focused on, ostensibly on middle-age recovery, because it's a resource for people out there,
Yeah, and we're a lost demographic in the recovery community. I feel like there's been a lot more of that since Annie Grace's books have come out, and there's been more focus on people who aren't necessarily low bottom,
right, but
are still experiencing the same kinds of devastating effects to their lives, just happening more slowly, maybe.
Right,
I think it's important that we let all these people know we're like you. You're not alone.
Exactly. It took me a good number of years before I got it right, and whatever I can do to help other people get it right, I'm happy to do so. It's weird though for having people contact me looking for advice on how to. Yeah, so it's a little strange because I'm not used to it.
Right.
I never,
you didn't come from the background of AA and stuff.
I was in AA, but I never got to the 12th step. I usually bailed at one or two.
One or two, yeah. Did the AA 2-step.
Yeah. So, I'm just, if you reach out to me, I will help you to the best of my ability.
And,
I'll provide you with resources.
Along those lines, I feel like you've really missed out on something good about AA because you never were forced into it for any period of time. There's some really good things about it. And I feel like that's why I think it would be cool for us to maybe hit a couple of meetings locally that, because I'd like to go back and I'd like you to experience it through my eyes and to really meet
I don't know,
people.
man.
I think you would like it.
I'm
going to require it.
Yeah.
I think it will be mandatory.
We'll see, man.
I think I will demand it of you.
So
you're carrying the message. That's the 12th step.
I'm carrying a message. I'm not carrying that message.
The message that there is a way out.
There is a way out.
And,
it's through listening to the Recovery in the Middle Ages podcast.
Yeah.
So you experienced the all-you-can-eat buffet and the all-you-can-drink bar in Mexico, and you survived. How did that go?
Yeah, so as you guys know, I reluctantly was sent on a trip to Mexico at an all-inclusive resort, mostly because it was deeply discounted, I guess.
It's always a good reason to go on vacation.
It wasn't cheap, but it was a very, very nice thing. But I hate the idea right now. I still, like I said on the last show, I don't feel settled in my career and in my life. Maybe nobody does. And I don't feel like I'm at a place where I can take a vacation. But it was great. And it was sort of like Stockholm Syndrome, where I'm just like, I'm here anyway. I'm just going to love it.
That's the spirit.
But it was really great. But this is the ultimate workout for anybody's sobriety muscles. And I have been mythologizing all-inclusive resorts since I started getting sober, because this is one of those places when you're trying to stay sober that you just don't go to. Period. It's a horrible idea. I would always advise others against doing this.
Really?
Yes, because for obvious reasons. That's why when you went, I didn't go crazy like giving you shit about it, but I was worried. It's so difficult to for me. It was difficult. It's difficult. It's boozes everywhere. It's part of the culture. It's endemic. It's like, you really are an outsider at one of those places. if you're not like, because it's a constant saying no. Having said that, I definitely made it out bigger than it actually was. The minute I walked into the door, they're handing us, they got champagne.
See, that you stayed in a nicer place because we just got mango juice.
Oh, no, it was nice. A really nice place. And so the minute we walked out of the cab, champagne's in my face.
Right.
But that gave me an opportunity to jump in the deep end, rip off the Band-Aid. No gracias. And I noticed...
That's pretty good.
Yeah, no gracias. So, and then I got in the habit of reaching for the child drink, which is fucked up, man. Why do I have to be a child? Why?
Well, you don't, but the child drink is probably tastier than the adult drink.
It is, but it's the way it is. You always get a weird look. But
listen, do you really care if the Mexican guy who's giving you a drink, what he thinks of how much you drink?
No, I don't. It's all in my
your head.
100%. And just like when an alcoholic, I'll talk about myself. When I was first getting sober, we got rid of all the alcohol in the house. There was no alcohol in my house. Mm-hmm. And we still were hosting holidays. And we made the decision to have a dry holiday. Mm. And so I think I was talking to a sponsor at the time, and I said, "Oh, no one's going to want to come to my holiday because there's no alcohol." And he goes, "You know who the only people who really care if there's booze at a party is alcoholics."
Yeah.
And I found that to be true. We don't do that anymore. We still, now that I'm a little better, I don't have a problem with it. My wife is comfortable with it, and I like to be a good host. But the idea that I thought people wouldn't want to come, spend time with us. This is our family,
right?
Because of that, it was absurd. We had a great time every year. Everyone had a blast. It was awkward for me because everyone knew it's unusual that you don't have alcohol.
But a lot of people probably had a better time.
I think they did.
And the next morning they woke up, they certainly felt better.
Absolutely.
Right? See, I'm going the other way. I go out now, I had to go out and buy wine for something we had last weekend. And it just doesn't bother me generally. But I go to the liquor store and they had this Fit Vine wine, which is, it has an image of a runner on it. And it's, they're trying to sell it as some sort of a health wine.
They do that with beer a lot.
Right.
And it's so laughable.
Right. Michelob Ultra is for the athlete.
Right. When you're done playing beach volleyball. But, grab a Michelob Ultra.
It really annoyed me that they were, and I'm in a liquor store, and I don't care about being in a liquor store. I'm not tempted because, if anything, I'm repulsed.
Yeah, because you still have to be a host. You still have to, have your wife and her family and friends and your family.
Yeah, it's fine. But knowing what you know about alcohol and the pitcher plant and how people are, who start with the best of intentions end up sliding down into, dependency. Is it responsible to serve people alcohol? I've been struggling with that lately.
Yeah.
What does that mean morally for me to be pushing this on somebody else?
Boy, that's a rabbit hole. I don't know that I'm prepared to go down.
Sorry, it's not on the outline.
It's a really. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, only because, you and some other people on Naked Mind Group. One woman made a post that got me going. It got a lot of other people going. Where some local restaurant, put a sign out that said something, favorable about alcohol that isn't true. Feel a lot better with a drink. It was something like that. It was a little funny. And she was like, I'm going to write to the town board. And, this is up, they can't do this. And what is the message we're sending? And me and most of the other people on there were like, what are you talking about? You want to be an activist? Do you really want to shut down alcohol? Or are we taking that approach? I mean, maybe we should, but I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I mean, it's a private business. Alcohol is legal. They can market it however they want. Just don't shut, because alcohol is ubiquitous.
I don't know, but would you say that about cigarettes? Because you can't market cigarettes however you want. You can't market it to kids. You can't make it look, like it promotes fitness. Why do we have those rules about cigarettes but not alcohol? Alcohol kills more people than cigarettes.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know either, because this is
I don't have a good counter.
This is America, right? You can you can do as you please, but we all pay the social costs of alcohol. abuse. I mean, through higher medical premiums, through everything else, you know. So, you know, at the very least, I think there should be some strictures on that. You can't put a label on a bottle of wine that promotes it as a fitness beverage.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. It's one of those things I'd really like to explore because I'm not settled on my opinion on it. Most of what I'm doing right now is something like that comes up. I say, I'm not going to deal with that right now. I will think about that later.
Right. I mean, you know,
that's my procrastination.
I'm not gonna, like a teetotaler from the, you know.
No, and I don't want to be that guy
turn
that's
of the
like
century.
shaking your finger, the sober women, that group.
The temperance societies.
Yeah, you know, I'm not interested in telling people what to do. I'm a believer in lead by example. And
well, so isn't the example not to have alcohol in your house? Isn't that leading by example?
Well,
see, I don't know how we feel about this either. And I'm sorry we kind of got on this tangent, but it's something that's been on my mind lately.
Yeah. You know, I felt good about not having alcohol in the house, but I always had a tinge of guilt because, listen, my wife still enjoys a glass of wine.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't want to take that. I know for her it is a simple pleasure that increases her cancer risk. Yes. But I don't know. It's one of those things. I think, like, if people on the highway are all going 75 miles an hour, none of them are getting pulled over.
Right.
So does that make it right to go that fast? Is it dangerous? Is it illegal? You know, like,
the flip side is, right, people are adults. They can make their own decisions.
Right.
And, you know, you providing alcohol doesn't mean that you're forcing people to drink it.
Send an email to MikeR@middleagesrecovery.com and tell us your opinion.
Anyway, you were flexing your sobriety muscles in Mexico when we digressed.
For me, it started as soon as we reached the airport. Historically, airports are where the vacation drinking would start.
Oh, yes.
No matter what time I arrived at the airport, the bar was first on my list. Then the plane. I never thought I'd be able to sit through a flight without those glistening gifts.
Glistening gifts?
Dripping with condensation set neatly centered on a white paper cocktail napkin, beckoning to be consumed.
No, you haven't flown in a while, have you?
No.
Because there are no white napkins with glistening bottles anymore.
Well, the things I read sometimes, I just want to be clear. I don't think they're like brilliant or anything.
Oh, I think they're very good.
What I do is I'm constantly taking notes. It's like journaling. So on this trip, when I would get ideas or have thoughts, I type it out, and it's cathartic for me. And sometimes I like to read them. So that's what that is, a little bit of my brain.
So how did your experience of being on a plane compared to what you were expecting in your mind? Because the last time I flew, they threw me a plastic bag with a mask, a bottle of water in it, and like a cookie. There was no offer of glistening bottles of alcohol.
I hadn't been on a real plane in a very, very, maybe 20 years or something. We went to Disney World. That was the last time I'd been on a plane. And then, so I had this memory of you sit in the plane, what can you get you to drink? And it's alcohol everywhere and not anymore. Or at least not on this domestic. No, it wasn't domestic. We went to Mexico.
Right.
It was totally stripped down. Just like you said, it's more like a city bus these days than it is
which makes it easier for you to say no to alcohol. Which
was great, you know. So that dispelled that myth for me. You know, but people, like, as soon as you get to the airport, I mean, there's always an airport bar. And I think they're always open. And when I used to travel, first thing I did, you're waiting for your plane, gotta go to the bar. You know,
even in the morning, you were like a morning guy.
No matter what time, for me, airport was like, it doesn't matter.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's because you know you're in the duty free zone. You're not in America.
You have no duties.
I came up with all of the and so maybe that's just me that does that, or did that. And so getting through that, I mean, because, as soon as you get through customs, you're like, oh, now I got to have a drink. That was stressful. Right. Or just the stress of people, the bustling people and your kids and your wife, and you're keeping people together.
It's
and
the most stressful place on earth.
Right. So where better to have a drink?
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't. I don't know. It was just, but I got through it. It wasn't that hard. It took a lot of concentration, though. I'm still, I think, not at a place where these things don't bug me. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And it's not like an intellectual, like.
Well, what bugs you though? Is it that you can't have a drink, or does it bug you that there's so much alcohol around? What exactly is it that bugs you?
So, for me, it's the inner addict, and I wrote a little bit about this.
Okay.
But my inner addict is what bugs me. It's this little guy in my head who anytime there's triggers, like you're in the airport, you'll start to get these feelings like you remember having a drink. You remember that this was something you would do. It was like, almost like muscle memory. And when that stuff happens, I have a system of how I, yell it down, talk myself out of it,
right?
And just shut it down. I shut the thoughts. It's like a CBT technique. And so I have to still do that.
Do you name your inner addict?
I should.
There's this
Lyle.
It's not smart recovery, but it's rational recovery. The addictive voice recognition technique. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
So what you do is that little voice in your head, you give it a name, and you visualize it as some kind of a monster, like a slimy, creepy thing, and you tell it to get back in its cage and all this kind of stuff, and you personalize that addictive voice, and you make it something other than your actual self.
I think that's a great idea because I almost do that. I just hadn't named it.
Yeah.
But to treat it like it's a separate entity. I mean, I don't know if is that schizophrenia where you have a separate entity speaking in your head?
No, I mean, we have lots of people in our heads depending on who we're talking to and stuff, right? I mean, what is your ultimate essence of personality? That's a question for another show, maybe.
Yeah. And so it was really just dealing with that. I mean, for the most part, it wasn't like an ongoing struggle. Some people, we've talked about this before. Every day is a struggle. Every day is not a struggle for me.
Right. Even in Mexico at an all-inclusive.
No. And really what it took was, just to really put up my defenses heavy early on until I got there, and now you're in it and you're enjoying yourself and you're not drinking. And once I got there, and I'm like, oh, I can do this. Not only can I do it, I'm enjoying myself. And in this trip, I got a chance to really like connect with my kids about drinking a little bit, which was really interesting. I don't go overboard talking to my sons or especially my oldest about that I'm an alcoholic. But what he knows is for the past 3.5, 4 years, he has seen me be the only adult in most situations who's always, I'm the one they bring a Coke to.
Right.
Anytime it's asked, I turn my wine glass upside down. So he sees these things. And while I don't give him all the details, he's very cognizant that I'm sober. He even used that word once, and I never, which was really interesting.
They're very observant, the kids.
So one thing that I noticed was the positive effect that my sobriety is having already. Not just the fact that I'm not a dirty addict on the street who's completely responsible anymore, but just to set that example puts it into perspective for my kids that, there is a way to not participate in this, kind of poisonous culture.
Right.
And my dad did it, and look at him, he's happy. And so it was kind of funny because they had this swim up bar.
Your dad did what?
Dad did what?
You said my dad did it. Oh, right. Okay. I thought you were talking in Noah's voice.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
If my dad did it, for me, my dad, what did he do? He wasn't an alcoholic, but the German beers, he would be like, oh, this is like mother's milk. And, he would drink one.
Right.
But we would split this one, and he would really be like, oh, this is lovely. And, he was never drunk. I've never seen him drunk. And they quit drinking once I started having trouble 6 years
really?
ago. Yeah, they don't touch alcohol.
Easy for them,
Yeah. Interestingly. And so setting this example, I'm planting these seeds that maybe I didn't fully realize I was planting or was having an effect. Now, he really loved this swim up bar. There's this gigantic pools there, and during the day,
as a concept, it's brilliant, right?
It is brilliant, and it's not like a bar. Like kids were all over the place. So, you keep them away from there if there was a lot of. But during the day, it was really just him and maybe a couple other kids flitting around. And he really was just like, I love this. Is so great. I can't believe I'm 10 in Mexico at a bar with my dad. He actually said that. And so I was sort of begrudgingly like, whatever, it's not a real bar. He loves the Shirley Temples, and he was getting such a kick out of it. And so, come on, Dad, come on. And so I went over with him, and I ordered like either a virgin mudslide or a virgin daiquiri. I drank a shit ton of virgin daiquiris. I probably have diabetes from all of the daiquiris.
That's the problem is when there's alcohol in them, it's strange. You can drink like 12 of them, but if there's no alcohol after one, you're like, ugh, I can't. It's too sweet.
Yeah.
What's in a virgin mudslide?
It's a mudslide with no alcohol. It's like a milkshake.
It's chocolate milk.
Yeah,
shake.
chocolate milk and
it's like a milk smoothie.
Yeah, I liked it, and I got a lot out of just. But he was like incessant. We kept going back. We kept sitting there and he kept ordering Shirley. I'm like, no, you can't, And then finally,
They're free.
We were away from the swim up bar, and he wanted to go back. I said, no, I don't want to hang out at a bar. I had to finally say, look. And what I said was, I said, listen, Noah, when you're trying not to drink alcohol, it's really good to avoid bars, even though it's not. And he said, I said, you ever hear, if you hang out at a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut? Right. And he goes, oh, Dad, that doesn't affect you. You're not going to drink, he said.
Superman.
I was like,
he thinks you're a Superman.
Right. And so I had to say, okay, you're right. I could do it. But just having those conversations with him and listening to him here and there say things like, oh, I think when I get, old enough, what I'll do is I'll just pretend to drink, or, he's already planning how he's also not going to drink.
That's great. That's setting the example.
Yeah. Like whether or not that takes place is a whole other thing, but just the idea that it's something he's thinking about. But
one thing I noticed about, my experience in Mexico too, is, we'd been going to this place on just south of where you guys went for, the last 5 or 6 years.
Isla Mujeres?
South of there. We were right across from Cozumel near Playa del Carmen.
Oh, cool.
Place down there.
And Playa means beach, I found out.
It does. So Playa del Carmen is Carmen's beach, I guess, or the beach of Carmen.
And Playa Mujeres is the beach of the lady.
The first few years we went down there, I was still drinking, and it was one of those deals like I was only drinking wine, and the wine was terrible, but I would have a few glasses of this stuff, and then by 8 o'clock I'd be done. I'd just be lying in bed, and not that I go to bed much later than that anyway. Yeah. But I was able these past 2 trips, one with my one son that we went diving, and then the trip before that in April, to really get into like the stuff there is to do down there, and like to do it with complete attention and no feeling of hangover, no feeling of sickness, no feeling of craving for drinking. And it was wonderful. I'm like, why do people, I kept thinking to myself, why do people waste so much of their vacation like getting shit faced and lying around a pool? They could do that at home.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even my wife, who is a casual drinker, she was a great candidate for it. I'm finally on vacation. I can just sit here and drink alcohol all day. And first day we were there was some of that. You know, she's just like getting it all in. Every free drink, she's grabbing it. She did not become like inebriated or anything like that, but she was taking the normal opportunities you get at these things.
Yeah, right.
The waiter comes, you order.
You're paying for it,
right? Right. That's the other thing. This is all you paid for it. If you're not drinking, you're losing money. They say, but even for her, after even the next day, I noticed far less drink ordering, and she even made a couple of comments. She's like, "I just don't want to be tired."
That's it. There's so much else to do.
But maybe if I weren't being abstinent, maybe if I wasn't doing that, she would have wanted to drink along with me. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it's starting to set a more healthy precedent. And we did have a great time. We were not knocked out, tired by 2 or 3 o'clock because we're drinking all day, and we had a great night.
Did you see anybody drinking at breakfast?
Mimosas. But that's
still drinking.
Drinking, yes.
Just because you put it in a fancy flute glass, it's the same thing.
Your typical brunch drinks. This particular resort, I did not see the debaucherous alcoholics like you experienced. I just didn't see it. It was interesting. I heard it a little bit in a far-flung.
There's probably an adult area that you guys were not in.
Secrets. We were in Dreams. Secrets is the debauch.
Because the resort I was in, there was no real separation.
Right.
So the first thing we saw when we got there back in April, the very first thing when we walked down to the beach was some girl hysterically crying, sitting against a wall with a drink. and the boyfriend like pacing around with his drink like around the corner, and they'd clearly just had a fight. And then I watched another fight happen like a half hour after that, and I'm like, this is what, and like, I'm wondering, like, is this just unusual behavior, or would I just never noticed this, or would have laughed it off because I was drinking too, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. I noticed after you've said that, because I was like, nobody's fighting. Yeah. Minutes after, I heard a couple like, well, that's your fucking responsibility. And she's like, you always do this. And I'm like, okay.
Tropical paradise, right? Tropical. Just, you know, add alcohol and watch what happens. So, I don't know. You know, it's.
But how did I do it? You know, I was thinking to myself.
Yeah, how did you do it?
Listen, I got through this seemingly impossible scenario, and I thought it would be beneficial to our listeners if I sort of tried to break down what exactly did I do. And what I say, and I was really thinking about this, that I needed to stay. Now, a lot of people will say you go to another country, you find an AA meeting or something like that, which is great if you can do it. But I said, you know, you got to stay. I mean, you're fighting so much cultural programming internally to drink that you got to be on top of your game. You have to stay in the recovery headspace. How do I do that? When I'm reading a book or listening to something, usually I try and keep it recovery related. I do that because I enjoy it too. Mm-hmm. You know, if you hate that, don't do it, obviously. But I get something out of it. I worked on my recovery podcast. You know,
it's true. You were far more responsive when you were in Mexico than I was when I was in Mexico.
You know, I was on top of it. I was thinking about it, planning for the future, and then and just. You know, really, I think that is the main thing. You got to be wary, because I'll tell you, I dropped my guard toward the end of this.
Did you?
So, and that's when I had a bit of an issue. So it was not all, you know, smooth sailing for me. You know, and that made me realize that I really just have to be, at least at this point in my recovery, I still have to be cognizant of my thoughts and feelings and my surroundings. I say that because I had gotten through the 6 days or whatever it was, and I was patting myself on the back, and it was that last day, and I kept saying to my wife, I can't believe I didn't drink. This is amazing. You know, and she's like, all right, yeah, great. Way to go. And then so we left the resort, and I'm like, I did it. I fucking did it. Even with the unopened bottle of champagne in the room. Like, we didn't even touch the complimentary bottle of champagne. Like,
right.
She didn't drink it. It just sat there.
Yeah.
One thing I did do is they put out these complimentary airplane bottles of liquor.
Yep.
And I asked I was like, can we put that somewhere else? And of course the maids kept putting them back. But I
would always tell the maids to take them. Like, they gave me bottled tequila every day. I would just hand it to them.
I mean, it's tequila everywhere. But so we finally got to the airport in Mexico. You know, I'm feeling good about myself. I'm like, all right, here we go. And we got through customs, and you walk through, just like at the end of a museum, you go through the gift shop.
Right, exit through the gift shop.
So this one, you're right into the duty-free shop, and it was just alcohol. Holy shit. And the presentation, and it was beautiful, and these big bottles and all of your favorites and the light shining through them. And man, I was just like, holy shit. I'm just like, I did not expect to feel overwhelmed, you know, because I always pride myself. I'm like, it doesn't bother me. I could walk by the alcohol aisle in a supermarket. I don't care. But for some reason, man, my guard was down, and I just caught myself staring into a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label, which, if you don't know what that is, it's like $250.
It's the Johnny Walker that doesn't taste like ass.
Right. It's really good. Or it's probably awful. No, but I mean, my memory of it was, you know, this is something that is special. In any case, I was totally zoned out staring at this for a second. Meanwhile, my wife and 2 kids, there's chaos. There's people everywhere. It's just crazy. And I'm sitting there staring. And finally, my wife was like, Nat, what are you doing? And I'm like, huh?
Hey,
she's like, we got to pick out a gift, you know, for my mother or something. And I had this visceral reaction. It felt like a panic reaction, like a PTSD reaction.
Interesting.
And it was involuntary. It wasn't something that I could talk myself out of right away because it was physical. And I was just like, I started to feel a panic. It wasn't directly related to, I have to stop myself from drinking or anything like that. It was more subconscious. It was just a feeling, and I just felt like fight or flight. And I decided flight. But, of course, I look insane. But I said, I just looked at her. She could tell something was wrong. I said, I got to get out of here. I'll wait for you on the outside. And I just kind of got the fuck out of there. And I just stood there, and I tried to look at everything. It was just like Las Vegas. There's lights and restaurants. And I was just kind of like deep breath. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I felt better. They came out, and that was it.
It's interesting that Duty Free had that reaction on you.
It was just the bottles. And
because, you survived like alcohol being presented in front of you for a whole week.
Handed to me.
Yeah. But here it is, because it's backlit. And
it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful presentation. And I'm a sucker for marketing.
See, but the thing that I never feel tempted by Duty Free for two reasons. One, it stinks of perfume in there the whole time. It's disgusting. And two, I know like the savings are all illusory. Everything's marked up. So
right.
You're not getting a good deal anyway. But I can identify with that PTSD stuff. Like you really, you find yourself in a situation where you're encountering like a drug or an alcohol thing. Like I had a little bit of that in Portland when I was watching those people smoking crack in the alley, because it brought me right back to the Bronx, and I was like, yeah.
And it supersedes your conscious intellect.
Yeah, exactly. It's like goes right to your lizard brain,
Yeah, and so I didn't relapse. The one other scenario I wanted to bring up that caught me off guard.
Right.
Because I really want to show that, like, you can come prepared with everything. You can have the tools. You can have 3.5 years of sobriety. You can have a recovery podcast. You can read, 10 recovery books a month, all that stuff that I do. And still, when we were on something called Isla Mujeres, which is just like a little touristy island. It's the only time we left the resort.
Right.
And it's this cute little town, and it's just all about tourists. Mm-hmm. And we were walking to find the beach or whatever, and there was a Mexican pharmacy. And again, just like seeing the bottles, something clicked. And I remembered, wait a second, I'm at a Mexican pharmacy?
Yeah,
this
good stuff in there.
Fucking drug addict Disneyland. Some people, I've heard stories of people just going through hell, crossing the border to try and bring back bottles of Valium, Ritalin, whatever they sell. And
Valium and Ritalin, that's a party.
It tapped into this old addict mentality that I used to have of when you see it, you grab it when it comes to pills. The pills thing, I used to be like, the second I see that little orange sticker on the bottle, like, do not, may cause drowsiness, do not use while operating a vehicle.
That's for me.
You just grab it. You don't think, you grab it. The best time to pick up illicit narcotic pills is when you see it. And so that all rushed back at once. And I was walking with my son, and I'm like, again, I had that moment. I'm like, a little bit of panic set in. And I really took some time processing it. I didn't consider going in and buying anything, but I definitely was stopped in my tracks and processed it. But then we moved on. But it was really interesting that it had that effect. And still, again, another miracle is that I didn't sneak in there. Give me a bottle of Valium, whatever it was. Like, the miracle is that I didn't do that, because it was so second nature to me for so long,
But at this point in your life, 3 years plus years, 4 years, whatever it is, away from all that, was it anything more than a passing thought?
No.
You would never have done it.
Well,
right?
I don't know.
What if you were by yourself down there?
I don't know.
See, because family is really... it changes the game, right?
Sure does.
Because they're around you and all, and
I can't say for certain that I would have been okay. I really can't. I don't know if I
in some weird world where you're on vacation in Mexico by yourself,
myself, yeah,
and you walk by the Mexican pharmacy and there's no accountability, because that's the real test of the recovery, right?
Like, if you walked in here one morning and took a pile of really good Coke and dumped it on the table, you said, "Nat, I relapsed, and look what I got for you." What would I do? I'd love to say and love to think that I'd be like, "You motherfucker," and like wash it, wipe it off the table and kick you out. Never, all of that.
Right.
I just don't know. I just pray I am never in that situation.
I got all excited there when you said that. I was like, that's
a pile of Coke.
A pile of Coke?
So
you and me in the storeroom?
It goes to show you that you just never know where it's going to come from, and you have to stay vigilant. And vigilant, you don't have to, be crazy or anything, but always be conscious that you can. We're all human. We're all fallible, and you keep in mind what your goals for your life are. And for me, my goals in life does not include buying illicit narcotics, in a Mexican pharmacy. They don't include buying a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue, half price from a duty-free shop and drinking it in the airplane bathroom. My goals are apart from that, and that gets in the way of it. And so to keep that at front of mind is super important.
Well, I think it's helpful to run through some scenarios that are likely to happen, though, occasionally. Like, you walk around town and there's every reason to believe at some point you're going to find a bag of drugs in town. I've in fact found a bag.
Oh, yeah.
Bags of weed.
I haven't found anything full of anything, but I've found empty bags.
Right, or with some mystery powder remnants in them and so forth. And, what do you do in that situation? Do you practice what to do in that situation? Usually I just keep walking on by, but...
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's something to think about.
Obviously, if I was going to probably go off the wagon, it wouldn't be with the remnants of some weird white powder that I find in the street, because even at this point in my life, that seems more dangerous than satisfying.
You can't plan for every eventuality, but you give yourself these tools. But thinking about this Mexican pharmacy thing, I thought to myself, man, I've always heard great stories about Mexican pharmacies. What I did was I reached out on the Dopey Nation and just asked people, what are your Mexican pharmacy stories? I got a bunch, and I got permission from one guy in any case. But I asked, what are your Mexican pharmacy stories, essentially? And so Austin W. says, nothing eventful to speak of, but it actually is eventful. Yeah. But I definitely utilized the Pharmacies when I was in San Diego. Before they started requiring passports after 9/11, you could just ride a trolley from San Diego into Tijuana.
I remember that.
I was pretty young back then and living with my family on a Navy base down there right at the border. Our backyard was about 100 to 200 yards of dunes and then the border. My family used to cross over to Tijuana to get a decent supply of Tylenol 3. Tylenol 3 has codeine, right? Yep. None of them have really struggled with substance use disorders by any means, but they just happen to work better for headaches, migraines, etc.
Indeed, they do.
Work a lot better. It was really common around the Navy base, and no one really thought much of it back then. We had quite a stash before we left, which lasted years after we moved to the East Coast for the first time. It wasn't until quite a few years later that I started crossing over myself with a few friends whenever I went back to visit or when I went back to live there for a while. Never really had any close calls like others did, but this was well before the opioid epidemic became a household vernacular. We mostly got Valiums, Xanax, and hydrocodone back then, but occasionally I was able to get some morphine and oxy before crossing back. Things were much simpler back then, and I hadn't developed any kind of serious habit, just fun and games.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only one I'm going to read because we're going long. But yeah, it's interesting. And I'd be curious if you monsters out there have Mexican pharmacy stories, send it to Mike R at middleagerecovery.com.
Please do.
I
like reading them.
Yeah.
I bought Valium in Mexican pharmacy back in 1995, I guess the first time I went to Mexico.
How much did it cost? Do you remember?
I have no idea, but I just put it in a bottle of Advil or something and brought it back over the border. I figured, and they weren't really checking back then.
That ran through my mind too, though. I was like, what would I do with a fucking bottle of Valium right now? Like, am I going to smuggle it back? Am I going to, what happens if you do and, you get pulled and then your family's looking at you like you're an asshole,
That's playing the tape forward.
Right. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. And the last thing I want to say about my trip, because I don't know how much more people want to hear about this, is that the last panic thing that happened, we were running towards the gate, of course. The gate, it was time to go to the gate. We had been eating and hanging out, whatever. I was tired. We get into the gate, boarding passes. We start to walk, through the door that gets you down the ramp.
Right.
My wife turns and goes, "Where's Max's backpack?"
Oh shit!
The backpack had my iPad Pro in it. It had it had a lot of stuff in it, and we realized very quickly we did not have the backpack. And keeping in mind, I was responsible pretty much for it because I had the kids while my wife was shopping.
Oh boy.
Man, that panic. All I did was I looked at the person. I said, "I got to go find this backpack." They said, "Okay, Ron, you're just going to have to come back through and get checked." I ran, and this is pretty big airport, big enough where I had a few different ideas of where it might be.
Yes.
But there was a very distinct possibility that it was gone forever.
Right.
And this was, and just running through but I just laser focused. I thought, where were we? And I ran straight to the first place we were. And lo and behold, there was the backpack on the back of a chair.
Awesome.
At the sushi bar.
The sushi bar that nobody's in?
No, because it's Mexico airport. Who's
Yes.
eating sushi at a Mexican
I know.
airport? Me and Noah.
Did you guys actually eat there?
He had to have sushi.
I thought about it, and then
good.
I looked in that place, and I'm like, there's nobody eating in here. I wonder if people know something I don't. So we went to the Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville instead.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
It was great, but I mean, I couldn't believe I found it. I ran back, then I had to go through a serious check, because I was very suspicious. You had to run back and get a mysterious bag.
Yeah.
So I did the whole thing, but in any case, I made it through. We got home by 12 o'clock. I'm so happy to be back, and I'm glad we're back on a regular schedule here, which is going to change to evenings pretty soon.
Maybe not.
But I made it.
Yes.
I made it. I'm still sober. You can do it too.
Yes.
And glad to be back.
I'm
guys.
thinking maybe we should host a sober retreat in Mexico
at an all-inclusive.
Yeah.
Really,
We can
work
practice our strategies.
Yeah. That's like the pro league right there. That's the major leagues of
Bunch of
sobriety.
drunks down to all-inclusive in Mexico and talk sobriety.
Yeah.
But sober travel, all seriousness, kidding aside, sober travel is a big thing now. There's
That's cool.
Travel agents that'll book sober trips. There's sober resorts.
Yeah, I love the idea of these sober retreats. I'm hoping that we can plan a sober retreat for the Monsters at an RMA kind of meetup thing.
Yeah, that would be great.
In the near future. So stay tuned for that. If you have ideas for it, send them along. Okay. And with that, I would like to take a short break.
Okay.
And we come back, and then we're going to handle a discussion about AA and traditional 12-step and their attitudes or perceived attitudes towards medicated assisted treatment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these words.
I mean, if I don't have to pee at the break as a middle-aged man, I wonder, is that because I'm dehydrated or my kidneys are not working anymore?
I don't know. I still have to take care of my issue. I'm still having an issue. I have to pee every fucking 30 minutes.
Oh, that issue.
It's fucking annoying.
Yeah. So, okay. So we covered Mexico, and the other topic we wanted to talk about today is sort of arose out of a conversation I had on the internet with somebody, which is it's always a great way to
Sounds
start.
like a great show.
Right. So some of you may recall mentioned in the past that I belong to a number of different little sobriety groups in different corners of the internet. One is the Peloton Sober Squad, which is a group of people.
Can't get any more niche than that.
Who own Peloton bikes and I guess are sober. So I saw a post in that group the other day that read as follows. I'm not doing very well at this. I read and research and get the books, Naked Mind, Jason Vale. I don't know who Jason Vale is. Do you? No. Look up the podcast, etc., but then I don't actually read them or listen to them. Any advice? I go about 2, max 3 days. And then she says, can anyone recommend any hypnosis audio they downloaded that worked? Thank you. So when I saw that posting, it was a few minutes after it had been posted, and there were like 5 responses that are like, the only thing that works is Alcoholics Anonymous. You should go to an AA meeting, and then a couple of people were like, AA works. Maybe you're just not serious enough about your recovery, like that kind of thing. So I was like, well, maybe this woman needs a suggestion of a different sort. So I posted my comment as follows. I'd suggest talking to your doctor about medically assisted treatment. There are safe medications that can help with cravings and get you over the rough parts. Google the Sinclair method. AA can be effective, but the success rate is around 15%. It works well for the people it works for, but that isn't everyone. Now, I thought that was a fairly benign comment and a steering someone towards a medical treatment for a medical problem, right?
That's a dirty word.
The first comment that came up under my my own comment was, sure, take another drug to quit this drug.
Yep.
And I said to that guy, well, why don't you educate yourself about medically assisted treatment before dismissing it? AA considers alcoholism to be a disease, and modern medicine has plenty of ways to treat this disease. AA fellowship is a great thing, but it has a dismal success rate.
Oh, snap. No, you didn't.
I did. I went there.
Oh,
my God.
And
And then I got support from a few people, but then the guy who started to pick the fight with me went out and said, are you two in recovery? I've been clean and sober for 21 years, attended literally thousands of meetings. Which did wonders for his personality.
Yes.
I even worked in the field for a while. Don't even get me started on medically assisted treatment. In my experience, which apparently is none since he's not involved in it, it is largely a cash cow business.
Yeah. Well, there's some truth to the cash cow thing, but that's part of everything.
Yeah. Well, have you ever taken a look at how much money NA and AA take in a year?
Well, they don't.
There's a saying in Narcotics Anonymous, I attended both fellowships, that the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. And I don't know what that has to do with our conversation, but anyway.
That's what we're doing, one addict talking to another.
So, then we have a little more back and forth. He's like, why are you dissing AA so bad? And I didn't know what to say to that, because I wasn't dissing AA. I was offering an alternative to AA.
Right.
And apparently offering an alternative to Alcoholics Anonymous is dissing Alcoholics Anonymous.
Because for a lot of these people, it's either everything or it's nothing. There's no, sense that this can also be a tool used along with, and that's the only time I had success, quote unquote, when I was doing AA regularly, was when I was also, going to outpatient therapy, being treated with medication by a doctor, like doing the whole shebang. So this idea that, you can't even suggest, it's like you can't question the king.
Yeah.
Off with your head.
Right.
It's just a shitty attitude, and that's
it's shitty, and it kills people.
This is why there's a 7% reported.
I mean, you can quibble about whether the success rate of Alcoholics Anonymous is 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. But, if you had a drug that only cured 1 out of 5 people that got it, would that drug be considered a success or not?
It would be a treatment that went nowhere.
I mean, to me, look, I'm not going to savage AA, because I know a lot of people for whom it literally saved their lives.
It's
right?
great. It can be great.
On the other hand, I look at it like conquistadors that came to South America and were like, you guys, Christianity's awesome, you should convert. And then they're like, no. And so then they slaughter 1 million, but 1,000 converted, and they're like, see that? Look at that. What a success rate,
Success.
Now,
100% of those we didn't kill converted.
Right. So am I going to get like shit for comparing AA to conquistadors? Probably. But anyway, so the postscript of this exchange, which eventually I just sort of withdrew because it wasn't helping the original poster get any clarity about what would help her, put down the drink. And I just said, listen, OP, if you want to discuss it, just send me a PM and we can talk about it. And she did. She sent me a private message and said, could you send me the resources? And I sent her over to Claudia Christensen, who you might remember as the Babylon 5.
Yeah. I can't believe you're still talking to her. That's so cool.
I'm not talking to her. I sent her the link to the Sinclair method and to the documentary. I suggested she watch it and say, there are a lot of people who, I basically gave her the same spiel we say, and I also sent her a link to the podcast,
yes,
of course. Right. And then somebody else reached out to me.
Shameless money grab. How dare you?
Yeah. Somebody else who was a coach in a group called She Recovers, which deals with women's issues in recovery, reached out to me also. And cool. She may be getting me someone from that organization to come on and talk about women's recovery issues. Awesome. So I tried to turn this thing into a positive. And frankly, I was pleased that there were people who were like, medically assisted treatment saved my friend's life. And,
more and more people are saying that.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing, well, maybe it's because I hang out more in the alt recovery rooms these days than I used to.
And I don't have a horse in this race, I I don't make any money off of medically assisted recovery.
Yeah. No, but we know that it's important to educate people that there are options that are, because people tend to distrust doctors because of this opioid crisis. I hear a lot of that kind of blowback, like, oh yeah, doctors, look at what they did. And fair point, but they were lied to as well. And a lot of what we've seen, the evidence on how medicated assisted treatment is that it is efficacious. And in fact, I have a personal success story using Suboxone, using naltrexone, and using a camprosite. And there's a variety of medications that you can use. I laid out a few that I thought we would tell the listeners about. I'm not going to go crazy describing each one, but there's some that you may know and there's some that you may not know.
Right.
Methadone being the most well-known. It's an opioid that is used to treat pain and opioid dependence. It's among the most controversial MAT medications because it requires very long-term treatment and can cause withdrawal symptoms of its own. Methadone works by binding to the same opioid receptors that other drugs like heroin attach to. Methadone is one of the first, I'd say it is the first, one of the first treatments for heroin addicts. Mm-hmm. It's been used for a long time. I've known a lot of people on methadone. People call it liquid handcuffs, partially because they don't give you the medicine to go home with. For the most part.
Right, you have to show up and line up and
you're
get
there
it in
every
the cup
day.
and...
The guys I knew on methadone were there every morning, 5 or 6 o'clock to get their stuff. If they went on vacation, they had to do all of this special paperwork just to get a 3-day supply.
So if you're on methadone maintenance, right, is there a plan for an off-ramp?
You're supposed to. So when you get into a methadone clinic, you're also required to meet with a therapist or a clinician to discuss recovery.
Right.
They try and...
Is that like a real thing? Because you see these people who've been lining up for methadone for 20 years, And I wonder when it comes to medically assisted recovery, is methadone like the greatest example to be holding out there? Because people have some very definite ideas of how fucked up methadone is, right?
Well,
but you look at something like naltrexone or, some of these newer medications, which are
like buprenorphine,
designed differently. Methadone basically will keep you from getting high and from getting sick, but it doesn't really progress you down the road towards being recovered, does it?
I mean, it's one of those things. Like the guys I knew on methadone were not trying to get sober. They were doing it so that because they couldn't keep up their habit.
Okay.
So they would go in for their methadone, but they had to go through the steps. So they had to go in, they had to piss test to make sure all they had was methadone in their systems and that sort of thing. But I mean, I used to buy methadone from my dope dealer when he couldn't get dope. He'd say, I don't have that, but I've got, 50 milligrams or 100 of liquid methadone that he would sell me. And so he was really going to get his methadone. And somehow they let him leave with it, and I can't figure out how he did that.
Kept it in his mouth and spit it in a cup.
Yeah, I mean, it was this orange syrupy, and it made me feel good, But he wasn't, I don't know if that speaks to all of the people. I've heard stories of people success stories with methadone. It can be, when used properly and as directed, and with a program of recovery concurrently, yeah, you can get sobriety. The problem is the level of addict that typically gets sent to a methadone clinic are extremely, like, dire straits, acute, in the full. I mean, buprenorphine was more Suboxone, otherwise known as, was more of a white collar. When these white collar heroin addicts started to pop up and opiate addicts, buprenorphine really became the go-to for them. It was extremely difficult to get. Extremely expensive, but they would give it to you to go home with. You could get a normal prescription. I was on it for a long time. I could get it at any pharmacy, So
there's some racism there.
I think there is definitely some racism.
Black addicts get heroin and white middle class addicts get buprenorphine.
I mean, Suboxone should be as available to these people as methadone is. It would give them more freedom. It's a better drug. It's not just an opiate. It's got a blocker and an agonist and an antagonist, and it saved my life. Naltrexone being the other one.
Naltrexone is interesting because it's the only one that's certified for both alcohol and opiate use, right? And its use, among the alcoholics is, if you look at that One Little Pill documentary that we reviewed several weeks ago, it'll talk about the institutional resistance to getting that out into more doctors and more alcoholics. But that's kind of the thing that I think a lot of people who struggle with cravings and with just not being able to get that day one under their belt for whatever reason, I think they could really benefit from that.
Yeah.
It's just a little jump start.
It really helped me. I learned a lot about, it's Vivitrol, I think, is naltrexone.
Yeah, it's like a longer lasting.
Right. The Vivitrol, and this is another shot that's $1,500 a month if you want it. And I can't remember if my insurance covered it. I think it did. But, that's another that was really hard. It almost inoculates you from, but yes, it was developed for alcohol addiction first. When they later discovered that it was also blocking, opiates, it became indicated for that. I was prescribed long after I had an opiate addiction, when I was just struggling with alcohol most recently. I was prescribed naltrexone for my cravings for alcohol,
right,
along with a camprosite. Both of those drugs together, it's the hardest thing to explain. You're not high by any stretch of the imagination. It's almost like if your impulse to use is a physical thing in your body, for me, it removed that physical thing.
Right.
I didn't, and I was smoking cigarettes at the time, and I stopped smoking for while I was on it. That
sounds like a miracle to me.
I didn't have a desire, and the neurological function of how it works, I actually learned about in rehab. It's really interesting, but I'm not really qualified to describe it. But it does work on a physical molecular level to stop the craving. And I used it, naltrexone, after I came out of my OD, which, incidentally, yes, I OD'd on fentanyl, but that was the first time I had used an opiate in 3 years. So I wasn't like going into withdrawal from opiate. I wasn't an opiate addict at the time, but I had practically killed myself with it. So when it came out of it, and I went right back to my outpatient, talked to my psychiatrist. He knew what had happened, and he said, you need to get on these two drugs and don't stop. Don't take a day off. You take them. And I did, and I was diligent with the medication, and that was the start of me not needing those drugs.
Right.
And I'm no longer on those drugs.
There was an exit ramp. There was a plan.
Yeah, and I did it, and part of it is I had to follow along.
Right.
I didn't buy my I wasn't buying Suboxone, but I didn't buy it off the street, naltrexone, and then try and treat myself. I listened to my addiction doctor, did what he said, and I participated in 12-step. I participated in my groups, and that worked.
And I think that's my point overall, is that, addiction being a multifaceted problem, it requires a multi-directional solution, not, sit down, shut up in the AA meeting and, do the 12 steps and you'll be fine. I mean, that to me, that's like an antiquated way of thinking. I mean, you how can I possibly believe that a stockbroker and a doctor in 1931 came up with a recovery program that should be preserved in amber for all times as medical science increases, And so you went to 12-step at the same time you were taking those drugs. Did you get shit for that?
No, because I didn't announce it from the rooftops because I didn't want to be given shit over it.
So you felt like, despite the fact that your experience could have perhaps helped other people in AA who were struggling,
I was reluctant.
You were reluctant to discuss it.
100%,
and that is the problem with AA, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great things that AA brought to us was this idea that there was some therapeutic value to one alcoholic who has stopped drinking or addict talking to another one, sharing their own experience is very different and can be a lot more effective than hearing from some stuffy doctor who's never, used a day in his life, has never experienced the highs and the lows. And so that credibility, it goes a long way because they say, I've been where you are. And that's part of the sponsorship thing, which we're going to get to on another show. We wanted to do a show about sponsorship.
Right.
But that's part of it. And that'll be a tie-in to the next show, how you're relating to one another. And so by bringing that to the forefront is probably, to me, the best thing about AA. It's the community. And now, all of the, minutia of people arguing over little things, not so important, but people get tied up in it, and it's unfortunate.
Right.
And we can't just focus on the healing and focus on the sharing instead of, little things that just simply don't matter.
Right. Well, I mean, some things, you can take a lot of good out of that, people talking to one another, but I don't think it has to be within the structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, but that just happens to be what's available at the moment.
It's ubiquitous. So. And that's why you even sent somebody to AA recently. You said you should go to AA. That's a great example of what's been going on for 40 years. It's the easiest, simplest, most free thing you can suggest to someone. So therefore, it is accessible, and it can be great.
First, I said to go to your therapist and talk about medically assisted treatment. But if you feel like you need something, a more immediate thing, you could pop into any AA meeting, is how I put it. I think maybe we need to get to the end.
All right. So having said all of that, if you have opinions on this, are you in an AA group that is so traditional that you can't even be on antidepressants? I think that's more of an NA thing.
I have to say, I was surprised at the vehemence at which some of the people in AA came at me. Yeah. By saying that I am killing people by referring them to medically assisted treatment, basically. And I had to hold my tongue because my response would be like, AA has killed more people than naltrexone ever has. So
definitely don't say that on our show.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Right. Okay.
And so with that, send us a message, go to our private Facebook group, and let's discuss it. I want to hear from you guys. Write us at mikeR@middleagesrecovery.com. I'm just keep giving out your email.
All of the negative comments come to me.
Yeah, and we'd love to do a segment where we read reactions to the previous show. I want to hear what you guys are thinking. But with that, it is time for...
Recovery in the News?
Recovery in the News! Recovery in the news, recovery in the news, recovery in the news, motherfucker.
Yeah. Right. This week on Recovery in the News, it's actually drinking in the news. We have an article from businesswire.com. You've heard of IHOP, the International House of Pancakes?
I have.
They changed their name from International House of Pancakes to IHOP. Did you know that?
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of like there's that other company that did the same thing. Kentucky Fried Chicken is now just KFC. But I guess they really should be changing their name to International House of Pancreatitis because they are adding. They've taken the step of adding wines, beers, and champagne to their menus in selected locations. They are. Are they countrywide? They probably are, right? IHOP, the International House of Pancakes, is a breakfast spot, one would say, even though they have other things on the menu and people do eat there at other times of the day. But they unveiled their new libations menu, which they're calling Bubbles, Wines, and Brews, available at select locations. The exclusive menu features domestically and locally sourced beers as well as wine options. And the new menu is available at 3 IHOP restaurants in San Diego and New Mexico and will continue its expansion to New York, Rhode Island, and Maryland and Ohio. It's a soft launch because it allows them to pilot, test, and learn from guest receptivity and feedback to optimize the menu rollout. It includes mimosas and wines from Barefoot by the Glass, as well as beer from Bud Light, Blue Moon, and Corona. The new beverage menu is available for dine-in only. They unveiled some statistics that they said 66% of recent guests and 58% of younger guests have been craving an alcoholic beverage to accompany their pancakes.
Yeah. Really? I didn't know that. And now...
Well, they offer the Barefoot Bubbly Brut, Barefoot Bubbly Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon, and they actually
is that for breakfast too, or is it just like 24/7?
They put out a pairing, a suggested pairing.
Amazing.
Yes.
What goes with the Tutti Frutti Fresh and Fruity?
I don't know, but
Rosé,
they suggest the Barefoot Chardonnay is a perfect accompaniment to French toast.
Okay.
Yeah, and
is there a sommelier from IHOP?
I'm sorry. The Barefoot Bubbly Brut Mimosa cuts through the richness of IHOP's original French toast, pairing a glass of smooth, medium-bodied Barefoot Chardonnay with the big flavors of IHOP's Southwest Chicken Burrito Bowl. So I don't know. That to me, that's a little fucked up. But I mean, is there any place in society that is free from having alcohol jammed down your throat? I mean, I always looked at IHOP as the place to go with the kids for pancakes in the morning. Now the waitress is going to come over and say, "Can I get you anything to drink?"
Yeah.
And they're going to be...
McDonald's, too, is going to do that, I'm sure.
They are?
I've heard that.
Well, you can get McWine in France.
Of course, the French are drunk 24/7. I mean, when I noticed alcohol available at Chuck E. Cheese's, when I was deep into my alcohol addiction, I mean, when we'd be at a party, guess who's sneaking over and grabbing a beer?
I used to love the availability of booze at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh my God! It's one of those places you're so happy to have a drink.
Like a kid's birthday party at the bowling alley. You know, okay, you can sneak off into that seedy little bar. But Chuck E. Cheese, it's like a giant rat will give you a glass of beer. It's fucking great.
Yeah. So I mean, look, it's ubiquitous.
But I mean, what do you think about that? Should you be able to get barefoot Chardonnay, you pair it with your French toast? Or?
I think you should. Why not? You know, IHOP's a restaurant. They have the right to serve alcohol, and people have the right to consume it. Whether they should or not, I don't think they should. But you know, this is not communist Russia.
I just think it's a communist Russia where everybody had medical care and adequate food. And all that stuff.
Vodka.
Okay.
And so that is Recovery in the News.
Oops. Yeah. It's only the 50th show. I'll get the board right someday.
Happy anniversary. Well, that about does it for today, folks.
No. There's the Week in Weird.
Oh. Week in Weird.
Were you just going to skip that on the 50th anniversary show?
I was on the wrong page. Monstrous ancient dragon discovered by Tim Banal. Researchers in Australia have discovered the remains of an ancient and rather monstrous-looking flying reptile that has been likened to a dragon. The menacing creature was reportedly identified by way of a 3-foot-long skull that was unearthed in northwest Queensland. Given the scientific name Thapungakashawi, the pterosaur boasted a whopping 23-foot wingspan, and his menacing maw contained approximately 40 teeth. It's the closest thing that we have to a real-life dragon, marveled lead researcher Tim Richards of the University of Queensland. Quote, "It was essentially just a skull with a long neck, bolted on a pair of long wings." He went on to muse that the ancient creature was likely a fearsome beast with a spear-like mouth that would swoop down on unsuspecting prey. It would have cast a great shadow over some quivering little dinosaurs who wouldn't have heard them coming until it was too late, Richard said. Envisioning the pterosaur on the hunt, the fossilized skull was actually discovered a decade ago by a prospector who stumbled upon the proverbial scientific treasure. The name of the pterosaur recognizes his role in bringing the long-lost reptile to light and also honors the native Wanamara people who inhabited the region where the fossil was found.
I think...
a dragon.
You know what I think?
What?
I think that's somebody trying to build up hype for a new dinosaur that they're going to throw up at a museum somewhere. They're going to call it a dragon, when really it's just a dinosaur.
You want to hear what I think?
Yeah.
So, my theory on dragons. Look, there's dragons in ancient art and cultures all over the world. You see them in, Asia, dragons, and India, I think, and other places.
Sure.
Oh, in
Why
England,
not?
St. George and the Dragon.
Of course.
My thought is that these were not mythical, that like dinosaurs, they did exist, and it's just a matter of time until we discover the bones and find a witch dragon
How
to
come
ride.
we've never seen one in any history of Europe or anything written?
They're all over tapestries and and cave art and things of that nature.
Are they?
Yeah, dragons are everywhere. So that's my.
I don't know.
My
I
theory.
mean, maybe it's just a collective myth.
I think there's
Shared
dragons.
myth, collective unconscious,
I think not only that, they live in the hollow earth,
sitting on their hoards of gold, guarded by dwarves with axes.
Like, you didn't see The Hobbit? I mean, that was a
Of course I saw The
documentary.
Hobbit.
It's my favorite documentary, and that is This Week in Weird. That about does it for today. We had a great time as always. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us at middleagesrecovery.com, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, and Twitter. So tweet us at @twatyoutwit. Yeah. Support your favorite show. Drop a 5-star review. Join our private Facebook group. Buy a t-shirt. We have these awesome new t-shirts. Please look out for it. I just have to set it up so that people can buy it. We're going to take photos. They're really, 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 really cool. You're going to want one. I'm really excited to get these in. Write us, Mike R. or Natx at middleagesrecovery.com. We love meeting the Monsters and chopping it up on the Facebook group. And finally, the best way to help the show is to share it with a friend. If you get something out of our little show, please share the love and help grow the RMA movement. And as we say, non proficiat perfectum.
Progress, not perfection.
See you next time.
Be good.